Hi everyone, welcome to the presentation for Rugby Netherlands about warm-up and motor skills in youth training, especially in under 14 to under 18, so basically everything from 12 to 18 years old. We've been talking a lot about motor skills in general, and then later we can go into what that means for warm-up or what that means for the session in general. But more specific for warm-up today. So a few interesting things about warm-up and motor skill development is, do we even need a coach all the time to get players their better motor skills, or in a warm-up for that matter? Do we need rugby 100% all of the time? Can we learn something from other sports? Can we get better at rugby by doing other sports? Or take away the ball and make it a round ball, or I don't know, play football. Maybe that's cursed, but we can learn a lot from it. For me, what my vision is really important for myself is that I find instant solutions to encounter movement problems make for better athletes. Is that when we look at cross athletes come into the sport of rugby, we find we come from a high performance background, and when we play them in any other sport, doesn't really matter, that they're athletes at first, and they can be cross athletes because they possess really good motor skill and they have a lot of solutions to movement problems, which makes them better athletes. Furthermore, for me in youth, everything's about fun. Fun's engagement, and if we keep them engaged all the time and let them have fun, they'll find their way into the sport. If it's not high performance, it'd be amateur. It can be when they're done playing rugby. It can be coaching, it could be refereeing, it could be anything. But as long as we keep them engaged and make them come back, and I think we did a really good job. So where do we start when we look at warm-up and motor skill development? First of all, we look at age. While age itself doesn't say a whole lot, we'll find that out later. Because when we look at the LTD, which is the long-term athlete development, on the next slide, I'll explain a bit more about that. It's basically a theory and a template that tells where your athletes can be and why you make certain decisions. Next thing is periodization, formed into an integrated plan with a clear goal. My colleague next week on periodization will go a bit more into depth by that. So when you got that presentation done, you can formulate a clear goal for yourself, why we do that certain warm-up, why we choose certain exercises, or why we look at certain motor skills in that way. Mainly also important is that we educate our athletes, our players. Why do we warm-ups? Why is that beneficial for us? Why is motor skill development beneficial for us? But also, if we can teach them how to take care of themselves in terms of preparation and pre-app and re-app, we make them more self-aware, self-educated, to take care of themselves when they're later on, when they're 18, 19, 20, 25 years old, when they have this little ankle niggle, how they can make their ankles better, why did they do that. Also, it's a way of enforcing athletic skills and our movement patterns. It's a lot of stuff we can do in warm-up. And for me, lastly, there's a time and place for technical feedback. When we talk about motor skill development and what we do in warm-ups, let them have fun, don't coach them too much. When we try to explain how a beer crawl looks, just show one example quickly how a beer crawl can look, but don't coach them the whole time. they will find out for themselves what works and what doesn't work, and we need to make them in the longer run be self-aware about that. As I spoke to you earlier, this is the picture of the LTAD. On the left side you see the LTAD according to literature, and on the right side we see it translated by World Rugby and how World Rugby looks at it. You see there's H's next to the learning to train or training to train phase, and these are just general H's, because especially in Holland we sometimes got a lot of kids coming into the sport later, or student rugby for that matter, is that they come in the age of 19, 20 and they still need to, maybe don't have a sporting background, so they're still in the fundamentals part where they can gain a lot by looking at training in that regard. When we look at sometimes kids that come into the academy when they're 12 years old, they're still learning to train. They're learning to train 4, 5, 6 times a week, and being able to be consistent in those trainings and learn how to be consistent, but also still room for development, making errors, lots of errors. We want to make them lots of errors, so they can learn a lot from it. So basically left one is just really general, and you don't really have to look at it that hard. Just determine where your athlete can be in the whole scheme of things, and on the right side we'll see how World Rugby looks at it, which is a bit more interesting. So when they're 12 years old, they're still in the development phase. Players like to explore, and we're there as coaches to teach. We're learning them the game, and as we all know with teaching, they need to make errors to get better. So we're not there to enforce technique all the time. We need to put them in environments, or give them exercises or plays where they need to show the skill, but can't always, but not always have to show the skill like it's intended. So there's repetition without repetition. It can look different all the time, and the more they play it, the more they try it, it gets narrower and it gets better and it gets more ingrained into the system. To give them that room to explore, and when they're a bit more advanced, or when they had a bit more years with you, players, it can give them more challenges. We're looking more individual, what that kid needs to make a skill better, and then even in the longer run we're making them self-aware so that they can find errors in their game for themselves or in their skill execution, so that they can talk about it and we can help them get better at stuff, so they're self-aware on what they're good at and what they're not good at, and then in the longer run it helps them grow, because they take ownership for their own development, and they know what they need to do better at, what they need to get better at. Next to the LTDD, there are also general motor skill competences, and they vary. There's a lot of them, and so it's basically what movement skills make us good athletes, and what do we need for rugby, or is it just rugby all the time to make them better? So a few things can be acceleration, deceleration, and re-acceleration. Can be throwing, catching, grasping. Can be anti-rotation and core bracing, which is basically a bear crawl, or doing a bear crawl and getting pulled over. We got jumping, landing, rebounding. Mechanics, which is basically you're sprinting at acceleration, you're sprinting at your agility. Jumping in a line out could be. And if we look at the right picture, or the picture on the right, is we translate that into movement skills. It could be walking, running, hopping, skipping, turning, twisting, all this sort of stuff. So sometimes we expect kids, we try to make them faster. We say, that 14-year-old is not fast enough to be on the wing, or he's just not fast enough. It doesn't matter if it's on the wing, but just not fast enough. But then we look at the kid a bit better and we ask him to stand on one leg, and he can't even do that for 3 seconds. But we still want to make him better by doing sprint training, or run faster. But he can't stand on one leg, which is basically what sprinting is. It's just pushing off of one leg all the time, and then we forget a few steps. So we like to make kids better, but we forget some steps that need to happen first, or we need to progress into. So which can be jumping and skipping and all that sort of stuff, into acceleration, into agility, into sprinting. So what happens in the academy a lot, which I do with the academy, we introduce a lot of play. So we don't say do 10 knee to wall for your ankle, to make your ankle better. But we try to do it in a lot of games, and as they progress over the years, as they're getting older, towards the 18-year-old, we still play, but we make that prehab exercise a bit more important for themselves. In that way, by the time they're 18, they have sufficient knowledge and training experience over the years to know what they need to be good at, and what they need for their own body. As I said earlier, development happens in their own timeline. So you could have a 16-year-old that's not ready to do his own prehab, or someone that doesn't have the right motor skills yet, because he's just maturing later or different, and that's not something that's bad or good. You just have to acknowledge the fact that that's there and build around it a little bit. What we can do a lot in play is we can challenge them, and we can build autonomy on the back of it. And when kids feel they have their own say in things, they feel more engaged, they learn a lot more, and they also take more ownership for their exercises and for why they're there, in their progression and their skill acquisition. And like I said earlier, movement solutions to encounter problems happens a lot in play, because it's not structured. It's not, you have to get a ball and you have to pass it straight there to the square, but it's they have to find constant solutions, because it's constant in play and with a game in place. And a way to look at it can be by constraints-led approach, and I don't want to go in too much in depth about it, but it's basically, we have a task, there's an environment, there's an organism, and that all those three things can influence a player, and that's also three things that we as coaches can influence to change the outcome of a game, or not just the game, but outcome of the skill, and how good they are at the skill, and how much solutions and how much progress they make in a skill. So when we look at the integrated plan, when we look at warm-up or the movement skills, we can tick a few boxes. Usually, even in warm-up, we can look at max velocity, which is your maximal speed, acceleration, you can do strength, you got mobility and stability, you got agility, injury prevention, which is your warm-up anyway, motor skill acquisition, conditioning, and communication and teamwork. Those are all boxes you can tick off in your warm-up. Should not all be at the same time, could be hard, but they are boxes you can tick off, especially in warm-up. Here are a few examples from what we can do at the academy, and I'll show you a few. Here we got getting up with the ball, ball behind the back, talking, communicating, feeling each other, and also a little bit of strength and mobility there, because they have to get up, they have to work together. Basically it's the same as this one as well, but here it's in a beer crawl. Early, feeling for the body, feeling for the environment, and it's a lot of fun, of course. We can get up the quickest and back down, 5 reps quickest without dropping the ball. On the right we got some jumping, leaping, using hoops. Why we use hoops could be there's a lot big square, and there's a lot of room for error, but also when they jump into the hoop they know they've done right, and when they didn't jump in the hoop they know they've been, it's wrong, it's not far enough, they have to push off harder. So it's basically self-learning mechanism there. And the middle one needs a little bit of explanation, because I think it's a big chaos otherwise. There are 4 people on the line, on the white line, and they have to get across to the other side. There are 4 other kids in the field. One's hiding behind a bin for a bit of fun, I guess. The kids on the sideline don't know who from the 4 in the field are gonna tag them. Everyone has their own one they have to tag, but they don't know who it is yet, so they have to find out while they're running. And basically see them try to get across, and they have to find out who's their tag. If they get tagged, they're out, but if they make the try line, if one makes a try line, the rest have to do burpees. There's a nice bit of skill there, and he makes it to the back line, so it means the rest of the team has to do a few push-ups or burpees, or I don't know, just pick whatever you want. It's fun, it's engaging. Here's another warm-up example. What we do while playing games, so we can play tag on one leg. It's basically a square where they have to jump on one leg, and one tries to tag the other. When we do it for 4 times 30 seconds, each leg 30 seconds, basically you got a little bit of plyometrics there. You do a little bit of conditioning, because then we go into tag and beer crawl. So they're on the floor beer crawling, and then allowed to stand up, and there's one tagger again. If you do that for 4 times 30 seconds, you got your conditioning again, you got your strength, you got your mobility, you got your prehab, anti-rotation, everything we've talked about. If you want to play, if you have to tackle later on, you can go wrestling. So let them choose the starting positions on their own, and just let them wrestle full effort for 10 seconds. Who gets the other one on the ground? Full effort 10 seconds is what Manu talked about in the other presentation. It's your max effort right there, and with sufficient rest, you got your conditioning. And then lastly, it's your 1v1 sprint battles, and then let them pick their own opponent. They know from themselves who's the fastest and who's almost the fastest. Just let them sprint for 20-30 meters, and then you got your box tick there. So you got your max velocity box tick there. So in this warm-up itself, we have a contact prep, we got communication for the tag, we got pre-app for lower body and upper body later on as well. We got plyometrics, we got speed, we got some agility, stability, mobility, strength. and we discussed some movement better. So we got squat, we got a hinge, we got hopping, skipping, we got body awareness. So we basically did, it takes us 10 minutes and we ticked a lot of boxes there. So when they progress through older ages, we try to play less, but still play, but make them do more general warm-ups, bit more individual based approach. We can still tick boxes in warm-up, so we can do our butt kicks and our high knees a bit more, but then we can also add way more acceleration and max velocity and even conditioning in the warm-up. We can even add rugby skills in the warm-up, because they can execute stuff like that way better, and because these athletes went through the general warm-ups, or they're playing warm-ups earlier when they were younger, they possess more skill to do more general warm-ups now, and we can maybe even go into play 10 ball, which means 5 against 5, one that gets the ball quickest around, plays the ball 10 times to their own team without getting intercepted. That's your conditioning there, and if you keep the square tight, there's not a lot of place for high acceleration, max velocity, so it's already their warm-up and you don't need to look at it as in butt kicks or high knees. You can still use it as your first 1 to maybe first 3 minutes, and then after that go into those rugby skills and those communications, and if that's important for your session ahead, then use that for sure, and look at it that way. Hope to see you all at the Q&A on Friday. Happy to answer all the questions, and we can talk a bit more in depth about everything actually. Thanks for listening, and see you on Friday.